Hi, welcome to Reading Strategies, the passages. Now, in the pacing episode, we talked about some general pacing strategies for the reading section. In this episode, I want to really dig into the passages and talk about exactly what you need to look for on the passages on the test so you can nail the questions. But first, two really important things. First of all, I want you to watch this episode with the next episode together in one sitting. Let me tell you why. In this episode, we're going to go through the passages and some really good strategies for reading them and what to look for. But it's the next episode where we'll talk about the question types, things like eliminating wrong answer choices, and then we'll answer the questions that go with the passage that we're going to look at right now. So I don't want to leave you hanging. Try to make a commitment to watch both episodes at the same time. Next important thing, print out the passage that goes with this episode right now before you keep going. I'll have chunks up here as we go through it, but it's not the same as having the whole thing in front of you and just circling it and going through it and reading it how you would read it on a real reading test. So before we start, make a commitment to watch this episode with the next episode and print out the passage that goes with the episode. So let's get started looking at some general strategies for the reading. First of all, we talked about this a little bit when we did pacing. Don't read the passages in order. Remember, we talked about how you're going to want to read them in the order that feels most comfortable to you. Let's say you're more of a natural sciences person. Make sure you read that passage first. And the cool thing about the ACT, remember, it's really predictable, so you'll know exactly what order the passages are going to go in. Skip around, find your favorite passages. Do those first while you feel really fresh and really feel good and you can get those questions. And then leave the passages that you're not as crazy about, leave those for the end when you're getting really cranky, when time is running out. And you probably won't do that well on them anyway because they're not your favorites. So you're going to want to go in order of your preference, not in the order that the passages appear. Next, mark up your passage. There is nothing worse on the reading section than a naked passage. You want to mark all over it. And we'll talk on this episode about exactly what to look for so that you can answer the questions effectively. Next, don't worry about the details. Students always ask me, there's so many details here, what do I need to know? It's really complicated, and the passage is so full of just lots of complex details. Don't worry about the details at all. A cool thing about the ACT is that there are a lot of questions that test detail, but they're usually line reference numbers on those questions. So if you need a detail, you'll know exactly where to look in the passage for the detail most of the time. So instead of focusing on the details, don't worry about them at all. Just make a note, there's some details here, and instead, you're going to want to be a macro reader. You want to think the big picture. What's the author's overall purpose here? What's the main idea? So in this episode, we'll talk about some strategies so you can really just pull the main idea out of these really long, complex passages. But first, let's just look at a quick look at the format, just so you have an idea of what it looks like. We did talk about this earlier when we did the intro, so I'm just going to rush through this. Remember, each of the 4 passages is about 750 words long. There's 10 questions of mixed difficulty on each passage, and 35 minutes for 40 questions and 4 long passages. Not a lot of time, a lot of reading, which is why you need some great strategies that we'll get into in a minute. We talked a lot about how we have 4 really complex passages that are long and not a lot of time. So we need a really aggressive strategy to pull out exactly what we need to nail the questions. Now we're going to look at that strategy. You're going to want to do 2 sweeps through the passages, one really quick one and one longer one from top to bottom. Let me tell you about them, and then I'll tell you a little bit about why you want to do this. So, first sweep. That's 20 to 30 seconds long. So we're not talking a big time commitment here, just a really quick sweep through the passage. What are you going to look for? Let me tell you. First, just what passage are you looking at? And what's the source? That's the little title on top. Is it humanities? Is it natural science? What kind of passage is it? And then you'll have a little blurb at the top, usually about a sentence that just tells you the context. Maybe it's from this essay, maybe it's from this book. Okay, just read it. You'll get an idea of where the passage is coming from. Next, you're going to want to just skim some key parts of the passage. Let me tell you what those key parts are. The big deal is just that first paragraph that you'll see, the beginning and ends of each subsequent paragraph, and if you have time, skim the last paragraph that you're going to see. Think about it. This makes a lot of sense. When you write a good essay, or when you read a good essay, what's important? Well, your first paragraph tells you what you're going to say. Usually that's the thesis, that's the gist, right? And then your subsequent paragraphs just elaborate. And usually the first and last sentence of the paragraphs, well, the first one introduces what the paragraph is going to talk about. Right in that middle just usually has like some examples. Then that last sentence usually just sums up what that paragraph just said, and usually transitions to the next paragraph. So those are the most powerful sentences in the paragraph. And each one is the first and the last. And then if you keep reading, you got to the last paragraph. Usually that'll sum up what just happened in the passage. So if you just skim through these really quickly, remember 20 to 30 seconds, you'll already have a really good sense of the passage and what's going on. Also, you're going to want to adjust the strategy according to the passage type. So as you just do this quick skimming, just a couple things to look for depending on the passage type. Just really fast, prose, just look for things like the characters. What's going on? Who are the characters? What's the setting? Where is it taking place? Not a big deal. As you skim through social science, what's the topic being discussed? Is it some philosophical topic? Is it government? Just what's going on. Humanities, do you notice anything about the topic here? What discipline is being discussed? Is it somebody's art? Is it somebody's music? Okay. And science too. What kind of science is it? Is there some big cause and effect or some big theory being discussed here? Again, very quickly, just sweeping through. Let's go on the second sweep and see what that looks like. The second sweep is reading the passage from start to finish. Now, before we go on with the second sweep, you might be thinking to yourself, Devor, this is kind of strange. So I just read a bunch of stuff. Now you're telling me I'm going to be reading again from start to finish. What's the point? Why don't I just read it once from start to finish? That's a great question, and students always ask me that. This is a big deal. You really want to have the two sweeps. You really want to have that first 20 to 30 second sweep. I'll tell you why. First of all, it increases your comfort level with the passage tremendously. There's a completely different feeling. If you go in to reading the passage from top to bottom with that second sweep, and you already know from your first sweep exactly what it's talking about, the main idea, the context, you feel really good. You almost feel a little snide, like you can look around the room and think, I know something you don't know. About what the passage is going to talk about before you go through it. Instead of just digging right in and there's all this jargon and it's really complicated and all these ideas and you're reading it from top to bottom, it's a completely different feeling. If you already know a little bit beforehand from that quick 30-second sweep, it will help your accuracy on the questions and your comfort level tremendously. Next, helps if you run out of time. There might be times when you just are running out and you're halfway through the passage and you think, oh my God, I got to answer the questions. I don't have time to finish reading the passage, and you get a little stuck. But if you've already done that one quick sweep, you know about the overall gist of the passage and the flow already. So a lot of times you can answer 5 out of the 10 questions just from that first 30-second sweep. So if you're stuck, if you're running out of time, not a problem. At least you can run through, get the questions that you recognize, that you have an idea about from that first quick sweep. And then usually you can even make some educated guesses on the rest of the questions just because you've done that first sweep. And you already have a much better handle on the passage, even if you're running out of time. So that's why you want 2 sweeps. So second sweep, read from top to bottom. And let's go into exactly what you're going to do when you do that reading from top to bottom. Start to finish, you're going to read. And you know what? Set a pace a little quicker than normal reading. I mean, you know this because you don't have a lot of time to read. So you're going to read quickly. Mentally summarize each paragraph. So after each paragraph, you're going to read it. Just take a second and think to yourself, what just happened? This makes you answer yourself, what did I just read? Otherwise, I always have students tell me, I just realized I read 3 paragraphs and I had no idea what they just said. This always happens when you read something really boring. So make a habit to stop after each paragraph and just take a second. What just happened in that paragraph? Just a quick sentence in your head to summarize. Concentrate on the central message. Remember, we talked about not getting bogged down in details at all. So as you read, think, what's the overall purpose here? What's the main idea? And you're going to focus on the big picture. Draw inferences as you read. So train yourself to ask these I wonder questions. We actually do this with books and material that we really like. You'll be reading through this book you're really into, and some guy will say something to some girl, and you're thinking, why would he say that to her? I wonder, is he coming on to her? Is there some baggage there I don't know about? Kind of these read between the lines sorts of things. The ACT has a lot of questions about inferences, and we'll get into them a little later when we talk about the question types. But as you read, keep an eye out for these kind of innuendos or times reading between the lines, and train yourself, even though it's really boring, to get kind of interested if you can. What's going on here? And ask yourself, I wonder, why would the author put that example there? I wonder, why would she say that to him? I wonder, why are they in this place at all? Things like that, drawing inferences as you read the passage. Next, mark up your passage. We talked about this already. You want to mark all over it, and we'll talk about exactly what to look for. Okay, in prose passages, you're going to look for emotional content. They're going to ask about things like people's moods. They're going to ask about insight into relationships between characters, character development, things like that. So keep an eye out for just the feeling, the tone of the passage. You know, is it kind of dreary? Is it kind of peppy? You know, are the characters really excited about something? What's the mood? Who's the narrator? Things like that, things that you would think about when reading a story. And then your strategy on the other three passages is going to be different because those are factual, right? Those are nonfiction. And the other three passages, you're going to look for these things. First, cause and effect dynamics. The ACT loves to ask about things causing other things. So if you see, you know, something happens and later along the line, it causes something else to occur, mark it up. Author's opinion and overall purpose. Remember, we talked about main idea, really important. So when you see something like, this was my mission, or sometimes it's a little more subtle, it'll just be a really strong sentence, maybe the first sentence of the paragraph, and you know that everything else is following from that sentence. Mark it up. That's the main idea. So keep an eye out for author's purpose and the main idea of the passage as a whole. Next, examples. Remember, we talked about not getting bogged down in detail, so don't worry too much about examples, but you want to mark where they are, just because that'll give you a sense of the structure of the passage. And comparisons on contrast. The ACT loves different instances or different theories or different people being compared to each other. Anytime you see any kind of comparison or contrast, mark it up. And we're going to do an example so you see what I'm talking about. We talked about some great strategies for reading the passages. So now let's practice on a passage.